Hi there. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. As was just mentioned, data storage is growing at a very significant rate. One way to put those numbers in perspective is to look at what a 60% annual growth rate means. It means that if you took all the data on the planet today, or all the data that you have, on average, that'll grow by 100 times in the next 10 years. So what you have today is about 1% of what you'll have 10 years from now. And when you look at privacy, one way to really dig into the details is to look at the data itself, because really when we're talking about privacy, we're talking about digital information, which is what data is. So if you look back in time to get some perspective on the future, what you'll find is that, as would not be a big surprise, the amount of data that people create has really increased over time. It used to be that you could measure data that people created in bits or bytes, which are characters of information. And then as we got into written information, you started to get into thousands of bytes, thousands of characters worth of information in terms of the objects that were being created. And then we got into digital images, as well as tracking internet activity, and now you're getting into millions of characters worth of information. So that's a brief history of kind of how we've gotten here and the kinds of digital footprints that we've left in the past. And these have created some really substantial challenges in terms of privacy, but also some really incredible benefits. So with that in mind, if we then start to look out into the future, one way to look at that is to get a real sense of what kind of data are people going to be storing? Who are the organizations that are creating all this information? What are they doing with it? And where is it going to be coming from in the future? And as the person that started my company, CleverSafe, we have a unique ability to see that with some real granularity. We make the largest data storage systems in the world, and we sell those to the largest data storing organizations in the world. There's about 6,000 to 7,000 organizations around the world this year that will deploy at least 1,000 terabytes of storage. And a terabyte, just to make it simple, is 1 trillion bytes. So they both start with T, makes it easy to remember. So we're talking about organizations that are deploying 1,000 terabytes worth of storage, additional storage this year. These are the customers that we sell to. I talk to these kind of people every day. Haven't talked to all 6,000 or 7,000, but I've probably talked to the majority of them. And we've sold about 1 million of these terabytes, 1 million of these $1 trillion worth of storage systems to these organizations. So we have a pretty good sense of exactly what's happening, and it really is quite interesting. So what you're seeing is not just one trend that's driving the growth, but trend on trend. It's like growth on growth. It's not just that there's one thing that's driving this, it's like a stacking up of acceleration. So there's really no doubt that going forward, the rate of data increase is going to continue and to continue to accelerate. Part of what's happening is the types of objects that people are storing are getting bigger. And I don't mean a little bit bigger, I mean a lot bigger. Back when digital images, photographs kind of dominated storage, which started in around 1999 through kind of the mid-2000s, those objects were thousands of, or millions of bytes, megabyte size. Now that digital video has become a type of data that people store, those objects are 1,000 times bigger. So, when you take, you're storing millions of things, and now you're storing millions of things that are thousands of times bigger, it really drives some growth. And so now the majority of all data that exists, if you were to cut a random internet cable and look at the bits, or crack open a hard drive and look at the bits, the majority of them would be digital video. And the vast majority of all data currently being created is digital video as well. Going forward, even larger data types are beginning to be stored digitally in a very common way. One, for example, is genomics data. In order to fully sequence a human genome and collect all the information associated with that sequencing, it's about a terabyte, which is 1 million times bigger than a gigabyte, which means it's about 1 million times bigger than a movie. So it's a lot of information. So, not too many genomes later and you have a lot of data. So if we dig into this a little further, what you see is not only are we growing in terms of storing bigger and bigger things, but within each of those object types, the things are getting bigger and more common. So for example, in the world of video, which is currently the largest creator of data on the planet, not only is there more video, but the video itself is getting bigger. We recently completed a transition over the past couple decades from the old television formats, known as NTSC and PAL, to HD. And what that means from a storage point of view is everything gets at least 4 times bigger. There's a lot more resolution, which means it requires a lot more storage. The next transition that has begun, and is really inevitable at this point, is the transition from HD to what's known as 4K. It'll probably be marketed as UHD, ultra high definition. Even more bits on the screen. Looks great, sports is incredible, but it's just a lot more data, a lot more storage. And then after that, there's another format called 8K, 8,000 dots times 4,000 dots on the screen. It looks phenomenal. I recently spoke at the Tokyo International Film Festival, and they did an 8K video conference. It might have been the first 8K video conference ever. And so we had a conference full of people, and then there was a screen with a conference full of people in another location, and you could see, you know, in incredibly high resolution, it looked like they were, you know, they were with you. And you can see how for wall-sized displays, this kind of resolution is just going to be required. And Japan as a country is really in the process of moving to 4K as its standard because it's about to do Olympics there. So all the broadcasting, all the displays, all the cameras, all shifting to 4K across the country. And then 8K, and there's even one after that called 16K, believe it or not, which will be even bigger. You're seeing similar sorts of things happen within genomics data at an even more accelerated rate. In 2003, the Human Genome Project completed the first sequence of a human gene, and it cost about $3 billion to complete that one sequence. By 2006, that had come down to $10 million, $3 billion down to $10 million. And now this year, Illumina announced a machine which is in production, there's hundreds of them out there now, that sequences a gene for $1,000. And you can see what's happening is, you know, what was once a kind of a country or global research project now is becoming a common medical phenomenon, and soon will become a common consumer phenomenon. There's talk of $100 gene sequencing machines in the future. If it's $100 to sequence your gene, are people going to sequence their cats, you know, and dogs, and recreate them and do all kinds of interesting things? Yeah, when $100 starts to happen, I think you're going to see just an explosion of that kind of data. So another way of thinking of this is to think about how people will use these capabilities. And if you were to go out and buy today a hard drive and travel back in time, what you would find is that device has more data storage than all the data storage on the planet in 1956, so going back 50 years. In 1956, a hard drive cost about $50,000 for 5 megabytes worth of storage. And the hard drive of the day was the IBM RAMAC. It's kind of the size of the size of a bathroom. And on a pounds per terabyte of storage basis, it was about 400 million pounds per terabyte of data. Today, a hard drive that you could get for $150 is about 4 terabytes is typical. There's 8 terabytes that you'll see soon. It's about a quarter pound per terabyte, so it's 1.6 billion times more efficient in terms of its data storage, density. So one thing that would be interesting is if you were to go back in 1956 and say, what we do in 2014 is we sequence human genomes and we store those on hard drives. People in 1956 would first ask you, what's a human genome? Why do I care? And even if you could explain that it's this chemical sequence that kind of dictates how life works, they would have no idea how to sequence it. Okay? So not only did we create the storage technology that made that incredibly affordable to do, but we created all these supporting technologies. And other things that would be surprising to something in 1956, if you showed them like a YouTube video, pick whatever the top video of the day is, something I'm sure culturally enriching, they would look at that in 1956 and they would say, this is really stupid, but kind of funny. And why in the world are you spending $1 billion worth of storage to store that thing? Because that's what it would have cost. And now we don't even know. It's like less than a penny to us. So what that means is if you go out 50 years, the kinds of things that people will do will to us today seem ridiculous. They will be things that we will say, there'll probably be certainly things that also will not be super culturally enriching, just maybe funny and silly, but some things that will be really profound. And one way to think of it is, in the same way that a hard drive you buy today is equal to all the storage on the planet in 1956, the things that people will have in 2064 will be equal to all the storage on the planet today, will be what we'll all get. And all the networking that's on the planet today, the whole bandwidth of the internet, that's what everyone will get for themselves. All the computing that exists today, everyone gets one of those too. So what kinds of things will people do with those incredible capabilities? Just a few thoughts that I had as I was putting this slide together night before last. You could certainly use that kind of capability, $40 billion worth of bandwidth, $40 billion worth of compute, $40 billion worth of storage, to basically take a full high-res 360-degree video of your entire life, every moment of it. You don't even need to take pictures, because you'll have all pictures you could ever take ever automatically stored in that incredible video. You would probably, if you had children, you'd want to maybe know where they were and ensure their safety. You could have a complete video of where they are instantaneously. Another interesting thing you could do is you could have an all-channel forever DVR. So no more like picking what programs you want to watch. Just tell it to record every program ever that ever comes, and you'll have them all available on demand to you. As a matter of fact, that's not even 50 years away. That's pretty much 20 years away kind of number. Another thing you'll see enterprises, I think, do is store their entire web history, like everything that everybody's ever done at that organization. Perhaps some privacy issues there, but they might want to prove, certain compliance things they didn't do or investigate behavior. For example, if a virus got into their organization, how did it get there? How did it spread? I mean a computer virus. That would be the kind of question you could go back and answer. And you might even consider having a storage of all traffic on the internet, because you could go back and figure out what happened, figure out how a security breach might have occurred. Another interesting idea, which one of the other speakers kind of mentioned a little bit, was the idea of an environmental recorder. What if you could just record what happened in the environment in extreme detail, like every insect, every plant, what they're doing, what the state of the air that they breathe every second is. You could really understand what's going on. And finally, you could imagine like storing a snapshot of your brain. That's an incredible amount of data, but it's in the same way that we look at human genome today and say, one, that's an incredible amount of data. I don't even know how to store it if I was in 1956. You can imagine the value in storing like the state of your brain, and that technology might be available over the next 50 years. And ultimately what happens is, whether or not this is used for good or evil is the same kind of question that you ask for the written word or computers today. Is they can be used for good and they can be used for evil, and it's really kind of up to the human element to determine, ultimately, how beneficial or how detrimental these incredibly powerful capabilities will be. Thank you very much.